Well, hello, hi. It is with great pleasure that we present to you this debate that happened yesterday at Speaker's Corner. It was really quite interesting, I think. Two heads, two guys, one half Ukrainian battling it out. One one much more pro-Ukraine than the other. Lots of information shared, I think, and quite a lot of people got involved as well, which is exactly what you should expect from Speaker's Corner. I maintained I do still maintain as balanced a viewpoint as possible with this. I was in London on Saturday and I noticed the Ukrainian, quite by accident, the Ukraine protests, so I took some footage of that and tacked it onto the beginning. I'm very annoyed with this conflict, but I am extremely unbiased, and I understand there are some genuine grievances on the Russian side here, and I do support some of the views of Fernando, but I did not appreciate at all Russia invading Ukraine again. So there are reasons, and I think it's a long history involved here, but we certainly shared quite a lot of information. We hope you find it entertaining, and we are setting up these debates every Sunday now at around about 2 o'clock at Speaker's Corner. So if we see you, and hopefully we will, we hope you have a great time. Thank you very much, and we hope you enjoy.
Hits up. And it's my side.
There we go.
Okay, right.
All right, Pablo.
You
have the floor. I'm going to sit down. Yeah.
Let's just wait until this...
And if we could refrain from too many interruptions.
Great. I'll do an intro for the...
Yeah, wonderful.
Thank you.
All right, there you go.
Welcome to Speaker's Corner. We are here for the live debate, the Russia versus Ukraine showdown. In the Ukrainian corner, Pavlov, the Ukrainian champion, and in this corner, Fernando, for the Russian side.
Hey.
Please give your attention, ladies and gentlemen. The battle is about to begin. Pavlov will be starting.
All right.
Okay.
Alrighty.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to start with a little historical lesson. And this historical lesson is focused on the biggest act of nuclear demilitarization in human history. I'm of course talking about something that many of you have heard before, and it's called the Budapest Memorandum. What is it? It's a treaty that was signed between Ukraine, Russia, Belarus, Kazakhstan, the UK and the US about a full and complete nuclear demilitarization of Ukraine, of Belarus and of Kazakhstan. This resulted, as the name implies, in the biggest, the third biggest nuclear arsenal in the world, the Ukrainian nuclear arsenal, to be completely dismantled. What was the agreement? What was the thing that Ukrainians got in return? A promise of non-aggression and non-violation of Ukrainian sovereignty and Ukrainian borders by the Russians. And a promise by the UK and the US of maintaining and making sure that Russia would keep their promise. What happened after that? I think we all know that the war started in 2014, and the war is still going up until now, with the recent escalation that we've had in Ukraine. Now, the situation could be compared to a metaphor of two men holding a knife, which is the symbol of nukes. Two nuclear powers will not start a war with each other. It's insane. Nobody's going to kill each other with nukes. At least nobody would, with the same mind, would try to do it. But the situation can be compared to two men standing with one knife each. One of them tells the other, "Can I have your knife? I promise I will not attack you." The other man gives him the knife, and the man with two knives stabs the other one with both the knives at the same time. There's nothing stopping him. There's no nuclear weapons on the other side. There's nothing that's going to threaten the Russian side, far more powerful than Ukraine in terms of its military, in terms of the amount of military they have, in terms of the resources, of the manpower. Nothing is stopping them. So that's exactly what they did. They invaded Ukraine because they didn't expect to get anything in return. They didn't expect there would be retaliation. They were right in 2014. Their first invasion went pretty well. They were wrong now. because they tried to do the same trick again, and they got fierce opposition from the Ukrainians. And even the Ukrainians in eastern Ukraine, who used to support Russia, are now completely and utterly opposed to Russia. Even in the eastern regions of Ukraine, who had not succeeded against Ukraine, who have not left the Ukrainian control in 2014, even those people are completely opposed to Putin right now. Is this my second term?
Yeah, it's still going, but cameraman.
Excellent.
You're right. You're good.
I'm just checking how much time I got. This is the situation we live in. And in the meantime, we have Russia spew out shameless propaganda about what's going on in Ukraine. I'd like to give you a quick glance into one of the biggest arguments that the Russian side makes, the Azov Battalion. Oh, the infamous Azov Battalion that has these thousands and thousands of Nazis marching left and right into Ukraine to spread their evil agenda. But the Azov Battalion has one time actually answered some questions of the media to how many Nazis actually are there in the battalion. The answer was 10 to 20%. How big is the Azov Battalion, I might ask you? Right now, after the casualties of war, it's less than 900 men. That makes the amount of Nazis in the Azov Battalion a bit more than 100. I'm sure every single one of you does know that there are parties in Europe, that far-right parties in Europe that have more Nazis than that. And just to add insult to injury, there's a similar battalion in Russia that has never explained, that never revealed the amount of Nazis in their ranks. It's called the Sparta Battalion, and their sigil is an M with two S's, like the SS. One of them is an S, the other one inverted S. It's a very nice symbol, a lot more similar, I would say, to Nazi Germany than even the Volksangle that the Azov Battalion uses as their own symbol. Now, you might ask, how many Nazis are there in the Sparta Battalion? We don't know. They never revealed it. They never spoke to the media. They never revealed anything about them. Because they're secretive. Most likely, there's more Nazis there than they would like to admit. And more importantly than everything, the Sparta Battalion has more than 7,000 men. And these are the comparisons we're making. We're blaming Ukraine of having Nazis in their ranks, where the amount is minuscule. And we're not talking about Russia having Nazis in their ranks, when the amount is counted in the thousands. Even more than that, the Russian population fully, not fully, but openly supports the invasion of Ukraine. There are those, of course, there's many Russians who oppose this and who went to the protests and who tried to oppose Putin's war. Sorry, we're not taking questions yet. It's going to be him after me. And they've been imprisoned, they've been beat up, they've been tortured, and they've been killed by the Russian government, as they always do. Same as they did with Navalny. They poisoned him because he was speaking in a way that Putin didn't enjoy. He was actual competition for Putin. He didn't want any of that, so they poisoned him. He threatened him. And now Navalny is in prison, just like many other people who were imprisoned by the Russian government. And what actually happens in the Russian prisons? Well, very gruesome things that make the worst rumors about the Azov Battalion look like child's play. People get anally raped with brooms in Russian prisons. Their fingers are broken in the edges of doors. Their limbs are broken. Their spirit is broken with psychological warfare. With intimidation, their lives are completely shattered. This is Russia, my friends. This is what happens there. And now let me ask you, what's better? To be called a Nazi with no justification whatsoever, or to act like a Nazi and to be calling Nazis everybody who opposes you? Thank you very much. I'm finished.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right.
Okay, so wait for the thing to run out.
1 second, can I... I've been preparing this yesterday for a very, very long time. I spent most of the day on it. So I'm very honored. Thank you so much for being here. It's going to be very interesting. And yeah, I mean, the gentleman right here, didn't give us anything new. I mean, this kind of stuff you can find on the internet.
Okay, 6 minutes.
Just project a little more.
I came here today to share my story with you. I was born in Lisbon. I'm the son of a Portuguese father and a Ukrainian mother. My uncle Nikolai lives in Ukraine, the region of Donbass, in a small town called Alchia. He's 63, born in Ukraine, married to a Ukrainian-speaking wife, but his first language is Russian.
Ukraine has over 14 million native Russian speakers. And just like other pro-Russian native speakers, Nikolai and his family over the last 8 years have suffered from the terrible events of the Ukrainian civil war. And yes, it is a civil war. In order to understand this better, I think it's important to go back in time in Ukraine. In 2010, February, Yanukovych, a pro-Russian president, was elected. The election was endorsed by the EU and NATO as a fair and democratic election. Back in 2009, the Kiev Post referred to Yanukovych as the most trusted Ukrainian politician according to a poll. This has changed swiftly around the end of 2013, when Yanukovych has refused to sign a EU trade agreement. His willingness to maintain closer ties to Russia has quickly spared protests, violence and division. This is what led to the Maidan Revolution of February 2014, a violent state coup that was led primarily by far-right ultra-nationalist groups like Svoboda and the right sector. These groups were responsible for overthrowing the Yanukovych government and set up their own interim puppet state. The opposition to the new post-revolution government placed by the far-right mob quickly grew bigger, leading to the rise of the Crimean referendum and its integration with Russia. Anti-revolution protests have sparked all over eastern Ukraine in Russian-speaking regions like Donbass and Donetsk. In order to forcefully destroy its opposition, both the Ukrainian army and privately funded fascist battalions that wear swastikas and praise Nazi war heroes such as Aidar and Azov have committed horrendous atrocities in eastern Ukraine. Odessa, 2nd May 2014. Peaceful pro-Russian protesters were attacked and shot by an armed Maidan fascist mob. After retreating to a city center building, the fascist mob has incinerated the building, causing 30 people to be burned alive. The police witnessed what happened, but nothing was done about it. Instead, the remaining surviving peaceful protesters were all arrested. Systemic airstrikes and shelling of pro-Russian towns became common. Luhansk, June 2014, a Ukrainian airstrike hit an administrative building, killing dozens of innocent civilians in the process. Donetsk, July 2014, a 4-story residential building was hit with an airstrike, causing the death of 11 local residents. The Madonna of Gorlovka is a memorial that can be seen in the town of Gorlovka since 2014. It is dedicated to a young mother and 10-month-old child that were torn into pieces by Ukrainian rocket artillery. The Alley of Angels is a Thompson memorial in Donbass, raised in 2014, with the names of 91 children. All of them were killed by shells of the Ukrainian army. These humanitarian crimes were not the only reason for the ever-growing separatism. A series of authoritarian and discriminatory laws were introduced under the newly elected Ukrainian President Poroshenko. An election that did include the eastern Ukrainian regions, making it completely illegitimate and bogus. I will give you a brief list of laws passed by Poroshenko. In April 2015, the Ukrainian parliament passed a law that bans Soviet symbols and communist history, illegalizing Russian history and making someone that sings publicly the Russian anthem punishable with 5 years of prison. If you sing the Russian anthem in Ukraine, you can be punished with 5 years of prison. This is since 2015. In April 2019, a language law was passed in parliament forcing all citizens to speak Ukrainian and for 90% of the media content to be broadcasted in Ukrainian. In May 2017, the Ukrainian president ordered for Russian social media networks to be banned. These platforms were used by over 25 million Ukrainian citizens. In April 2016, the Ukrainian president banned all Russian movies that were produced after 2014. In December 2016, the Ukrainian president banned Russian books that totaled over 60% of the book sales in Ukraine. In September 2015, the Ukrainian president banned several journalists, including BBC journalists, from entering Ukraine. All of this evidence does not point to the fact that Ukraine is an oppressive, authoritarian state that has systematically persecuted the ethnical Russian minority. I don't know what else will. Ukraine is not a democracy. It is largely a fascist state that controls media, speech, and opinion by force. A state that has taken away the rights of its own citizens to speak their own language, practice their culture, and their own traditions. The Ukrainian state was completely responsible for this war. It was the persecution and intolerance towards native Russian Ukrainians that has created Russian separatism. Any efforts to establish peace
with the first and second Minsk agreement were ignored or dismissed. And the result of this is what we have today. Thank you so much for your attention.
Wait, there you go. So I would like to read a little bit of history too, seeing that my opponent here has read his part of history. On 5th April 2015, Jarosz, who was the leader of the Pravi sector, party, this individual called them Nazis, fascists, the fascist mob, basically, the lynch mob, as he said. Jarosz was appointed an advisor to the Ukrainian armed forces. On 11th November, Jarosz formally stepped down as the group's leader. On 27th December, he announced that he and his team would be withdrawing from the group entirely, declaring that the right sector has fulfilled its purpose as a revolutionary structure and no longer needed. He stated he and his faction were against pseudo-revolutionary activity that threatens the state, fringe radicalism, and against violent revolts against the government. Now, I'm sure from this, what I just read you right now, and this is the only thing I'm going to read, you can tell that this Jarosz guy is truly an evil creature, isn't he? He gave up, he evilly gave up this power, this Nazi power that he had. So many fascist leaders in history have done the same thing, right? Well, no, they haven't. Nobody has done it. No fascist leader just gives up power that they have. And the reason is why this guy gave it up, because he's not a fascist leader. Because the Pravi sector is not a fascist party. The only fascists, the only proper fascists and Nazis you can find in Ukraine are the 20% of the Azov battalion. That is it. And as I explained before, this number is so small that it ranges from 100 to 200 people. Because the Azov battalion right now is only 900 people. Now, you might say, oh, 100 and 200 people too many. That's too many Nazis. I agree. But if you consider the amount of people who are fighting in this war, hundreds of thousands of people are on each side of the war, and I'm sorry, but 100 people with an unsightly ideology fighting on one side is not a deal breaker. Especially since on the Russian side there are 7,000 Nazis fighting on the side of the Sparta battalion, which is something that my opponent didn't face. But fair enough. Let me give you guys a little bit of history of my own, because again, I'll do the same as my opponent did. I was born in Ukraine, in southwestern Ukraine to be exact. I went to Portugal when I was a child, brought there by my parents. I lived there for 44 years. I'm very well aware of Portuguese culture, Portuguese customs, and the bad tendencies of the Portuguese people. And unfortunately, in the far left parties in Portugal, there's a lot of sympathy for Putin, for no better reason, but just to oppose capitalism, to oppose the US of A. They don't like it. They don't like the USA. They don't like USA even when they are correct. And fair enough, USA is not always correct. I'm not an apologist for them. But at this moment, the evidence speaks otherwise. What these individuals are saying is that Ukraine is fighting for their freedom. As I explained before, in the Budapest Memorandum, Ukraine did the biggest nuclear demilitarization in human history.
Time.
What did they get in return? They got invaded. That's half time. That's half time.
Are we doing three or six?
Three or six.
We're doing 6 each.
Alright, 6.
We're doing 6. I did 6.
Six. Yeah, that sounds good.
No, but that the intro was 6. I mean, this one we can do less. Because I mean, the goal is that we engage with each other and ask questions.
So we do one more 6 and then we can do 3,
fine,
yeah?
fine. We can go 3. We can go
Okay.
3.
Okay.
That's what I suggest.
Fernando, your rebuttal, please.
Rebuttal.
You mentioned that 10 or 20% of the Azov battalion are fascist. This is the numbers that they have given, right? I mean, are we supposed to trust that? I mean, the right sector and Svoboda, they were not the leadership of Ukraine, and they never were, but they were placed in parliament after the first interim government post Yanukovych. Now, you mentioned that Russia has invaded Ukraine before. When did this happen? In 2014, like this is when the war between fellow Ukrainian brothers happened. Fellow Ukrainian brothers. Ukrainians, pro-Russian Ukrainians against pro-Western Ukrainians. It is a civil war. It is not a war between Ukraine and Russia. Okay? The Crimean referendum happened, and more than 90% of the population of Crimea has decided they want to be a part of Russia. This was not an annexation. this was the choice of sovereign citizens to be a part of Russia. No one has to comply with the post-revolution regime that was a completely illegal coup. It was a completely illegal coup. No one asked people what are their opinions. Not everyone has to comply with the coup that happened only for the sake of EU and Western interests. So what do you have to say about freedom of speech and freedom of opinion of the pro-Russian citizens in Ukraine? And can they have a voice in politics? My uncle was not able to vote since 2014 in Donbass. What do you have to say about that? You call yourself a democracy? Really? Zelensky calls Ukraine a democracy? When Eastern Ukraine was not able to vote since 2014? Not able to sing the national Russian anthems, not able to practice their own traditions, to praise their statues, to send their schools to Russian-speaking institutions, to send their children to schools. Yeah, I mean, what do I have to say about this shit? Tell me.
So I'll start by engaging a little bit with the first points you made with the first speech you did, because that's where you did most of your points, where this individual did. I'd like to mention as pretty interesting the fact that he speaks about the Ukrainians making the only national language Ukrainian as a crime. Truly, how dare Ukrainians make Ukrainian the one and only national language? It's unacceptable. How dare they ask people to speak their language? And this comes to the conspiracy theory that Ukrainians segregate and oppress Russian speakers in Ukraine. Well, don't trust my word. Watch all the videos of the Ukrainian troops fighting against the Russian invaders and watch how many of them speak Russian. How is it possible that so many Russian speakers, supposedly oppressed by the Ukrainian government, are fighting against the invaders who are trying to take their homes, their freedom, and their lives? And we speak about the rights of Russians in Ukraine. Russians have the right to speak Russian. Russians have the right to think the way they want to think. But these are times of war, and I don't remember Great Britain being open to Nazi ideology when Britain was at war with the Nazis. And we are expected to accept the Russians to speak in the face of the Ukrainian people and sing their anthem and spread their propaganda freely in Ukraine and sow confusion in the Ukrainian lands because of freedom of speech. I'm sorry, but freedom of speech works with people who are not at war with us, with people who are not trying to directly hurt us, who are not trying to subvert us. When in times of war, freedom of speech needs to take the break. And that's exactly what Russia is doing. And I find it funny once again that my opponent does mention this. Because in Russia, you can't say a word against Putin. You couldn't even before the war. You would go to prison anyway. In Russia, you would go to prison right now for speaking against Putin, as thousands of people did, because they protested against Putin's genocidal war on the Ukrainian people. So I have to say here, I lived in Ukraine a good amount of my life. I've been in Ukraine just a month before this war has escalated. I've seen people speak Russian. I've seen people communicate in Russian. Nobody cared. Not a single person. Nobody cared at all, because they don't care. Even now, the Ukrainians don't hate the Russians ethnically. They hate the soldiers, they hate the government, and they hate the attitude. And this is the attitude I'm getting now, and this is the attitude Ukrainians have been getting for a very long time from Russians, as not as a relationship of brothers, but a relation between a master and a slave. And now, the people they saw as slaves, that they are rebelling against their masters, the Russians don't want any of that. Look at Lithuania. During the Soviet Union, the Soviet leaders were claiming Lithuania had an apartheid regime against Russian speakers. Well, I know plenty of Lithuanian people who still speak Russian even now.
Time. Yes! Thank you, Fabio. Well done, well said.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the support.
Fernando, your rebuttal.
Here we go. Let's go. So, you mentioned that you will not give freedom of speech to someone who is an opponent and that you consider an enemy.
The problem is that these laws, as I mentioned before, were passed way before the Russian invasion. We're talking about 2014, 15, 2017, and so on and so forth. So what do you have to say about that now? Yeah, exactly.
Back and forth, guys. Let's do an open discussion. Let's go.
Right.
It's
so
cool.
Your experience, I don't know how much relevant is that for an argument. I gave a list of laws that can be verified by everyone here. Who is it?
No. These two rebuttals. These two are gonna pick it out for a little while.
Verified by everyone here at any time, right? So I'm not sure to what extent your experience can be considered a valid argument, right? Sorry. Let him have his time. Let him have it. Because the experience that I have, my uncle in Donbass, he was not able to vote since 2014. Pensions were not paid to people from the bus since 2014. They were not able to send their children to schools where they spoke Russian. So I'm not sure, who are you talking about that they can speak Russian and it's widely accepted? Not in institutions, not in schools, not in churches, not in the public sector, that's for sure. And by the way, you say that Ukraine is the national language. Guess what? 30% of the population speaks Russian, and it's actually their native language. So no, you are a bilingual country, and you have to accept that. And you should not discriminate against people that oppose that.
You spoke about you being Portuguese, about having a Ukrainian mother, and it's fair enough. I respect your experience, and I think you should respect mine. But of course, that's not the Russian way, is it? That's not the way that Putin has conditioned.
Shut up! Shut up, you idiot!
That's not the way that Putin has conditioned.
The biggest idiot fascist in the
I'll get some
All right, please respect the format. I need to get up and.
This is the kind of arguments that I face. Very emotional, very uninformed, and somebody really misinformed. All right, this guy and this guy, and I would
We're open for questions. Let's try a Q&A.
This is the last go. I'll go, you go, then we get to and after, I'm trying to give you my time to give interventions, but that's okay. Now, Ukrainians were always open to the idea that Russian would be a second national language. But that was an impossibility. It was made an impossibility by the Russians in Ukraine, because they didn't want Russian to be a second language of the country. They wanted it to be the first language. They refused the majority of Ukrainians to have their right to spread their language as they wanted in their own country, mind you, in their own country. And this is not it. This is not the only thing. You said that I don't face the laws passed by the Ukrainians. I did explain that the law about the Ukrainian language has nothing to do with the far right, has nothing to do with fascism or Nazism, or whatever you want to call it. And you can say whatever you want. You can be emotional.
Not Korea type of stuff, huh?
Excellent. I'm very glad that you're interrupting me right now, because it shows that you have no respectability. But I would like to continue my speech as for now. In Ukraine, before this war, Ukrainians saw the Russians as almost a brotherly people. Of course, there was bad blood between us because of the Holodomor, in which 10 million Ukrainians were exterminated by the Russians.
No, they weren't.
But nobody wanted to speak about that. Maybe the Holocaust is a lie too, isn't it?
It's a lie.
No interruption, please.
50%
Thank you very much. I'm very glad I'm being interrupted right now, because it shows exactly what the Russians have been doing in Ukraine through their history. They've been trying to not let Ukrainians say a word about what they are, about their culture, their language, anything. And the Ukrainians now, supposedly, are these big oppressors. Could you please leave me alone? Leave me alone. Could you please leave me alone? Give her a hug, give her a meds, calm her down.
You should take meds.
Thank you. You know, you're older than me, but you're not mature. You're not showing any maturity.
You are a midget.
I would like to continue. I will use a little bit of extra time, just less than a minute.
15 seconds.
Because thank you. Just a little bit of extra time.
I'll give you some extra
Thank you
time.
very much. I appreciate it. How generous of you. Unlike Russia's foreign policy, which is everything but generous. And mind you, I would like to remind everybody once again about the Budapest Agreement. Ukraine was not the only country that suffered with it.
9 seconds.
Ukraine was not the only country that suffered with it. I'll get a little bit of this. In fact, after the war in Ukraine started, Putin has invaded the other two countries that were part of the Budapest Memorandum. Of course, we won't hear anybody from Russia speak about this. But Putin has, I'll get a few seconds, we already discussed this. But Putin has sent troops into the capital of Belarus, and he sent troops to the capital of Kazakhstan, to Almaty. And he put down peaceful protests that were there to oppose Putin's regime, to oppose Putin's puppet dictators that were imposed in those countries. Especially Lukashenko. So I guy this Lukashenko guy. That's an extra minute. That's time. I would just like to say the Budapest Memorandum has been violated. Everything is bad. I'm smart.
Yeah, big square.
Can we have an open discussion now where you can respond to each other?
We need to hear.
Keep attacking Russia, what it is as a country. But I mean, what that has to do with the actual crisis that's happening in Ukraine? And also, let me ask you a question. The post-Maidan revolution, the government that was placed there, it was not elected democratically. Why do we expect everyone to accept it? Did your government ask anyone of the pro-Russian citizens in eastern Ukraine if they want to be a part of it? They were not asked about it. They were forced to. Why did the Maidan happen? The Maidan happened because Yanukovych, before becoming president, he made promises to the Ukrainian people. What were these promises that he made? What were the promises he made to Ukraine? The main promise was the promise of a closer economic ties with the EU. That was his promise. Did he deliver after he became president? He completely took a U-turn, went completely the opposite direction, and decided to join an economic union with Russia, Belarus, and Kazakhstan, which was more or less a revivalist movement of the Soviet Union at that point. We can all see that really very well, especially with all these atrocities the Soviet Union has committed in their history. Now, what I would like to call your attention for here is that the comparison of this situation to, for example, the UK. Imagine this situation. Imagine Boris Johnson. And mind you, this has nothing to do whether you want UK to remain in the EU or you want them to leave the EU. It has nothing to do with this. But imagine Boris Johnson promising to leave the EU with most of the population supporting him. And after he gets elected, he says, nope, we're not leaving the EU. We're getting closer ties with the EU. And the most important part here is that the EU does not have the same, for example, Germany in the EU, it doesn't have the same melody of the Nazi anthem. Russia still has the same melody of the Soviet anthem as their national anthem. Russia still harbors desire to rebuild the Soviet Union. Lots of different Russian tanks and vehicles have been seen with Soviet flags when invading Ukraine. Sorry?
And it's their right.
It's their right. Yeah, of course. It's their right. Is it their right to also have Nazi flags in the mix? We're not doing any time. We're just doing the same.
Alright.
Absolutely. I think it's about time that we bring the progress. Thank you very much.
No. Let's have a rebuttal from
I
have about 10-15 minutes discussion between the two of you.
Go. You mentioned why the Maidan happened. Thank you. Maidan happened. And I'm glad this committee got success. No, not really. So look, you mentioned why it happened, but what you're not mentioning is the fact that the regime forced everyone to agree with it. People were not able to voice their opinions and to oppose it. Why do you expect everyone to accept the new regime? They were not able to vote. They didn't vote for it. They didn't vote for the coup. The government was taken over by force. And yes, there is nothing more fascist than that. There is nothing more fascist than that. The whole Maidan movement started with peaceful protests that were shot by the goons hired by Yanukovych. 100 people had died on the Maidan, shot by the pro-Russian ruler, by the goons of that pro-Russian ruler.
they did, I think.
The kinds of conspiracies that we hear from the pro-Russian side. These are the kinds of conspiracies. a bunch of Ukrainians dying.
No, I think that was actually proven true. Pablo.
You didn't ask what is your point. My point is why your citizens were not able to vote and oppose the Maidan revolt, the Maidan. Our citizens have voted in a president that will come into closer relations with the EU. They did not vote in a Russian puppet that would get closer relations with Russia. People went to protest. Yanukovych escalated it by shooting the people who went to protest, using Russian tactics, good old-fashioned Soviet tactics right there, and killing the opposition.
Victorian Europe, Jeffrey Gatt, put it up on the internet, telephone conversation where the American government, via the Victorian Union, decided who was going to be in the government in Kiev. It decided every single member of the government was going to be installed in the government in Kiev. Supported by the fascists, the Americans caused the coup. The coup took place. The coup was an illegal coup. It was a fascist coup. And he's not talking about European democracy. The fact is that Ukraine has never been in the last fascist Catholic state.
And what is Russia?
It's been an American puppet state for the last 10 years. It started from the Orange Revolution. He went on to that. He went on to the fact that Victorian Union, Jeffrey Gatt, telephone conversation. Explain it.
Well, I think it's pretty clear that the West, that the USA, and overall NATO doesn't like Russia, and they would have in their interest to have somebody who's against Russia in the Ukrainian government by force. And it is obvious to me that they will try to persuade Ukraine to get somebody who would be more on their side. Yes, but here is the part of this that actually matters. Here is the thing that
Ukrainian fascist.
Thank you very much. Coming from a communist apologist, that's the best thing you could have told me. That's the best thing you could have told me. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
I ain't going to say I know for sure who shot what, but I have seen quite a lot of evidence arguing that it was either some kind of special op backed by the Yanks, or
Very respectful.
or some kind
You
of...
can see
there was a
the reason why
I have to admit, I think it's...
Well, first thing I'd do is ask perhaps both of you to come back and clarify your understanding of that. Like, you got your point of view, he gave his point of view. I've seen information about this. Why don't we get you to have a look at that and come back and clarify? Because it is a central question in the background to all this. If in 2014 people were being shot by Yanukovych, your argument is correct. If in 2014 it wasn't Yanukovych, but other forces, secret forces involved, and then the Yanks got their, or the Americans got their people in, then it's another perspective on the question. Perhaps you could both have a look at it, and honestly go back and look at it and come back again.
Just so we are here on the same page. I'm not defending Yanukovych. I'm not even defending Putin here or Russia at all. No, I'm not. I'm exposing your regime as being a fascist state that is responsible for the war completely by on its own.
Where are these fascists? I've already told you. The amount of Nazis in Ukraine is
In your laws! What laws? I gave you a list of laws!
None of them are fascist laws.
None of them are fascist laws?
One national language is not a fascist law.
Banning Russian movies, Russian books, closing down Russian
The
schools.
Soviet books that oppose Ukrainian identity.
Where is the European freedom of speech then?
Where is the freedom of speech? Look,
No, it's very important because your president claims that Ukraine is a democracy.
you don't give freedom of speech to the side that's at war with you. You
Russia is not now at war with you. It wasn't. Yeah, but the laws. I gave you a list of laws at the very beginning. You still didn't give me a proper answer.
I'm giving you the answer right now. Those are not fascist laws. You're calling them fascist laws, but they are not fascist laws.
They're not fascist laws. Okay, let me pull out.
Why don't we pull out?
You're talking very much over
They're right
But
there,
what's
mate. You
happening
just...
now didn't just come out to
That's a good idea.
Russia has been doing it for a while now. First example is Georgia.
Excuse me, fella. Do you mind? Can you just close in here?
Ossetia, Abkhazia. And that would be their casus belli to attack another country, to protect the so-called minorities. And now they're doing the same. So whatever happened next, Biden, these are just specifics. This just shows the policy and modus operandi of Russian state.
Please speak.
I have the ball.
Yes. All right.
I like to speak that the gentleman said that it's a puppet state, right? It is the decision of people there. It's not. It didn't come from outside. It's what they have decided. They have their own tradition, their language, and culture. It's their choice.
Was there any appraisal of Lucian's tradition in that?
Were there any votes, any voting process?
Yes, of course. There was a Crimean referendum.
Yeah, where some cities voted 110, 120% during Russia. Where the Russian troops were allowed to vote. Where the Russian reporters were allowed to vote.
Do you know the only reason why the Crimean region was in peace all this time? Is because Russian troops, after the referendum, they went there and protected their cities. Yes, really. That's the only reason why those people left.
Russian troops were in eastern Ukraine too. It's just that they didn't use the Russian coat of arms.
That's conspiracy theory.
Oh yeah, it's all conspiracy theory. Yes, look, the rebels in eastern Ukraine, have just bought all of their weapons, all of their artillery, all of their tanks in Walmart. They just bought it on eBay. They bought it all from the Americans, of course. It makes sense.
And where did Sloboda Azov and the right sector got their weapons?
I already explained to you that right sector is not a Nazi party. I already gave you proof.
No, we're talking about the weapons. We're not talking about Nazi or not Nazi. Where did they get the weapons?
From the West, everybody knows that.
Yeah,
the West is helping Ukraine because Ukraine is getting attacked by a much more powerful country.
Oh really? They're getting attacked now. This last
they are.
They weren't. They were born. It's fellow Ukrainians killing each other.
Fellow Ukrainians.
Your brothers and sisters.
They identify themselves as Ukrainians? Do they see themselves as Ukrainians?
These are your fellow brothers and sisters.
You said yourself that about 14%. Did you say 14%?
They speak Russian.
No, did you say 14%?
I said native Russian speakers.
No, native ethnic Russians. You spoke about
ethnic Russian. Yes.
14%.
Yes.
That's it. Most of them are concentrated in eastern Ukraine, in the Donbass region.
Yes.
So no, sorry. But this is not a civil war. This is a war against a community of people who came to Ukraine, who were sent there by Catherine the Great, and after the Holodomor to occupy and Russify the region, and to use that leverage to rule over Ukraine. That's exactly what
they were born there.
Exactly. Stalin was doing it all the time. He was deporting people from one place to another.
I think that the children come. In Syria. The international situation is this. United States wants to take over the world. The war is between United States and Russia.
I'm sorry, since when is this conversation about America? I thought we were talking about Ukraine now. I thought we were talking about the people who are fighting against You feel that? You know, I could go to the police. I could go to the police and you'd get taken in. But I'm not going to.
Guys,
Hitler
Pavlov and Fernando, are there any things you want to ask of each other? Anything you guys want to ask of each other?
Thank you very much.
Anything you want to pick apart? Any analysis you want to give?
I love it.
Let's do Q&A.
Q&A, let's go.
Right.
Quick fire.
Do you support the right for Eastern Ukrainians to be able to vote?
Yes, I do.
Yes, you do. Okay. Why they were not able to vote since 2014?
Since 2014?
Yes, Eastern Ukrainians were not able to vote. Poroshenko was...
What's this vote you're talking about? Poroshenko was put in charge after the insurrection that happened because of the toppling of Yanukovych. Yanukovych fled and Poroshenko became the president.
So it was not an election?
Not exactly.
Not exactly, yes. Well, it was taken over by force. You didn't
by
ask
force?
Yes, by force. Well,
by force?
Yeah, by force.
By force of whom? No, hold on. What coup? Did the military invade Kiev?
Maidan.
Hold on. Whose force?
How? Okay. How did the Maidan coup happen?
How was it taken by force? That's
Yes,
what I
it was
was
taken by force. By violence.
Whose force? What violence? Like people were protesting. People were protesting. No, wait. Not people. Hold on. People were protesting in Maidan. People were getting shot at from the Russian side.
Not from the Russian
I will never. I categorically deny any of these conspiracy theories.
Not from
that it was the Ukrainians shooting their own people, because this is ridiculous. This is like saying, oh, you know, Jews just burned themselves during the Holocaust. It wasn't the Nazis. Nazis didn't do anything.
What are you talking about?
And this is what I mean. This is what I'm talking about. The Maidan was a peaceful protest that was turned violent by Yanukovych,
Yes,
and by
but
the
there
things
was
he
no
did.
fair election after that. That's the problem. That is the problem. You didn't ask people.
I'm sorry, but when a ruler oppresses its people, when he kills its people, I think it's the right of the people to insurrect against
All people. It was not all people. It was just certain people.
That most of the arguments here against this guy are at Communion.
2014. Right? As you can see, Crimea and Donbass did not vote.
All right, cool. Why did they not vote?
I don't know. It doesn't say.
I don't know.
Because
maybe
they don't give.
because
they don't give
maybe
a
they
shit about them.
abstained. Maybe they abstained.
Oh really?
Don't you think
Oh
that?
really? Oh really? And hold on. Elections were not organized and not recorded. Washington Post.
Hold on a second. They didn't allow them.
Okay, my friend, does it justify a full invasion on the foreign country?
You're insane. We are trying to justify
has not
here.
been there for 8 years. Who's going to place the peace there? The EU?
Yes, not Russia. Not Russia. Russia doesn't care about peace. And the people in eastern Ukraine, who had the biggest support for Putin, are the ones that are suffering the most with the war that Putin has started. And your uncle and all the people there are suffering now because of Putin.
Why are you speaking for my
Yes,
He's
they are.
great.
Because he's suffering because
They're
of
receiving
Putin.
humanitarian support.
Dude,
They're
you need to
receiving
realize humanitarian support.
Yes, they are.
Okay,
Yes, they are.
brainwashing is counts as humanitarian support these days, doesn't it?
What brainwashing? They're giving
They brought
food to people.
war to their lands. They invaded a sovereign country. But there were treaties to protect Ukraine from this invasion.
It's an illegitimate state that is not democratic. That was the result of a violent coup, right?
Banned opposition parties.
You accept that there were Russian troops driving into eastern Ukraine and Crimea in 2014.
Down passenger planes.
After
Exactly. Malaysia Airlines, something I wanted to speak about long ago, almost 300 people killed by the pro-Russian separatists in Ukraine. A plane that has nothing to do with the war. About almost 300 people died. My proof.
Do you wanna? You can do that. Does anyone want to ask a question? Anyone?
Here we go. Hold on. Whoa. The responsibility for investigation was delegated to the Dutch Safety Board, and the Dutch led. Okay, he's also racist against the Dutch. Dutch-led joint investigation team who concluded that the airliner was down by a book surface-to-air missile launched from pro-Russian separatist-controlled territory in Ukraine. There we go. And World War III still didn't begin, even though they had an excuse to start World War III. Because nobody wants World War III. Only Putin is threatening World War III.
Yeah, probably. It was a mistake.
Oh no, mistake. The whole thing was a mistake.
Explain, please. After the coup government took place after in 2014, why did they ban the Communist Party, the Party of Regions, and all the opposition parties? Why did they then take over all the newspapers and media? And why did they ban any opposition, any Russians from, like you say, on the east voting? So how is that a democracy?
How is that a democracy? Answer.
Any opposition, when there is an opposition party right now. Hold on, can I answer?
Because you
can
lies. That's why.
Can I answer? This is the kind of people I have to deal with. Anyway, here we go again. Okay, can I answer? Can I please answer?
Come on.
I can't go if I can get interrupted, please. Now I will answer this. Now, what actually happened in the situation in Ukraine is not what you're saying that happened. What actually happened there is that none of the rules that were imposed by the Ukrainians, none of the rules that have changed, have actually been a Nazi or a fascistic rule. Now, what actually happened?
No, that's not my question.
Here we go.
My question was, My question was, why did that coup government ban the Communist Party, the Party of Regions, and all the opposition parties? Why did they take over all the newspapers and media? And
Because the Communist Party is for the Ukrainians the same as the Nazi Party for the Jews.
It's same in Poland. It's forbidden in Polish
Absolutely.
to promote Nazism or communism because they are responsible for the biggest atrocities in the history of humanity.
The same thing. There's a lot of look. Most people who support my side won't be very vocal about it. They will just say yes.
Oh, really? I don't believe it.
This guy was vocal, but he was the only one. I'm sure you'll agree with that.
I don't believe it. I think you're just not getting as much as support as it.
Look, that's here in the corner, no, because the corner is
is a very diverse place, and there's lots of people who hate America here. So, as the Red Lady, look at the support you got. You got 3 hardcore commies as support. The guy who looks like Stalin, the red-haired lady who attacked me on camera. It's on video. And I don't agree with the fact.
Look, I don't agree with the fact that she attacked you.
And the other guy.
And by the way, just so we make things clear, I don't think that Russia is a perfect place. I don't think that Putin is perfect, right? But I think that not your people. Your people are great. Your people are amazing people. I think that your state, your government, is a piece of shit, fascist state that created a war between fellow Ukrainians, people from the West killing each other in the East. This is terrible, and this has been going on for 8 years. It's time for peace. It's
terrible, but it's not between Ukrainians. It's between people who identify themselves as Ukrainian as people who identify themselves as Russian. Now look, many people who are fighting on the Russian side are ethnic Russians. So at that point, I don't think there's much point to make that they're Ukrainian.
Can I ask you guys a question? Right, this is really, really important, right? What would be your solution, right, for peace in Ukraine? What's your end game?
The death of Putin.
Okay?
No, that's the only way. There's literally no other way this can end, because Putin has shown that he refuses any kind of diplomatic solution. He has already threatened nuclear war for sanctions. He's threatened nuclear war for a no-fly zone. He's threatened nuclear war for almost everything at this point. The man is really insane.
Putin and they get somebody worse, right? Or the entirety of
Chris. Just somebody worse. Who could be worse at this point? What could be worse than threatening nuclear war? Somebody who actually goes and presses the button. I mean, that's not much of a difference, is it? Putin is already threatening to press the button, so it's kind of the same thing. Nothing is worse than worldwide nuclear war. Let me just say that. Sorry, go ahead.
What's your solution?
So, the terms established in the Second Minsk Agreement were not followed, unfortunately. I don't think your government is very interested in following those terms either. The regions of Donbass, Donetsk, and the independent republic should be made officially independent because they want to, not because Russia is forcing them, because they want to. That's the will of the people. They don't want to be a part of your regime anymore. Right? And that's it. That's going to establish peace, right? And these are the sort of terms that were offered by Russia to your government, right? It's as simple as that. Russia is not interested in invading Ukraine, taking over the territory.
They very much are. They very much are. If they were not interested, they would not have invaded. Putin has invaded.
Yeah, but he gave already the terms for peace.
Okay, hold on. Here's the terms for peace. If you don't do these terms, I declare war on you and attack you. Is that a reasonable position from a world leader?
The war has been going on for 8 years.
He declared the war in that moment with no justification.
Well, what instigated
no
that?
No declaration of war, nothing.
The invasion.
Yeah. And this escalation, mind you, happened during night. During night, the Russian troops started bombing and invading Ukraine again. Yeah. You spoke about children. Let me just tell you this one thing. In Lviv, there was a protest of about 120, 130, I think, baby carts that were set on the plaza to protest against all the children who have been killed through this latest escalation. It's a lot more than the children who died in Donbass, and I feel for all the children who died there. I obviously don't condone any children dying. I would never say that. I would never support genocide. But let me tell you this. This war was brought on the Ukrainians by Russia, not the other way around. That is the thing that I will never compromise on.
So, Matt, if I could ask, right, in your opinion, how many civilians were killed and wounded in the Donbass conflicts as of March 2016?
Is this a pop quiz, Chris? This is a really low
Wikipedia,
blow.
right?
This is a really low blow.
It's not low blow. It's not low blow. This was before the war. This was in 2014, 15, 16, and so on and so forth. This is not a low blow.
This is a really low blow.
This is not a low blow.
Well, what's the...
This is not a low blow. These people are being forgotten.
Why don't you say us? Why don't you tell us right now?
Sure. Well, according to Wikipedia, right, 3,400 civilians killed, 2016, 2021, 13,000 killed and 35,000
So is it 3 or 30,000?
No.
Is it civilians and the military?
What's your point?
Civilians and the military,
Well, my point is that it's a war. Right?
No kidding, it's a war. Yeah. And who started this war? It's not a civil war, it's a war of Russia against Ukraine.
No, it's not.
Who started this war? Who started this war? Russia started this war when Russia invaded Ukraine.
After the Maidan revolution, why did your government didn't allow the eastern Ukrainian regions to vote? Why did Poroshenko was elected illegitimately? Can you answer that question?
Poroshenko was elected in a state of emergency when Yanukovych, as we like to call him, Bandukovich, had left the country. Proper elections might have been held later, but there was no possibility for proper elections because Putin invaded almost immediately. And Russian troops started streaming into eastern Ukraine, they started streaming into Crimea, and they occupied those regions as soon as possible.
The majority of the Crimean people, they wanted to be part of Russia. They had a referendum, and that place was very peaceful, simply because Russian troops got there after the referendum.
Russian troops got there after the referendum?
Yes.
That is purely wrong. Absolutely wrong. The Russian troops got there first, and then the referendum happened.
I think the Russian troops, there were some Russian troops that were already in the country.
Yeah, you're right. You guys don't know what
He's right.
You don't know what happened first.
He's right.
What
The thing
happened
is,
next?
do you admit
Donbass and
Poroshenko treated all Eastern Ukrainian Russian people as a second citizen?
How? How did he do that?
Did he say that these people, they will not get the same pension? They will not get
Which people? Eastern Ukrainians?
Yes. Really?
Yes, really.
Can I just intervene?
Let's get the video.
What are you gonna get me RT?
No.
Hold on. Is it talking about the people after they separated from Ukraine? Because at that point, obviously, yeah.
No. This is in 2014. He said these people are useless.
What people? Just Eastern Ukrainians in general?
No. The people of Donbass, the people of all this area. He says.
Wait, sorry.
He says textually, these people are useless. They are second citizen, and I'm going to treat them as a second citizen. Yes or no?
Show me the video.
No problem.
Check it out. Go on. You were saying.
All right, I can confirm this, that after 2014, the people of Donbass and Donetsk, including some friends of my uncle that lived there, they were not paid any pensions. So these people stopped being paid
After
pensions.
the war began.
No, like at that point there was separatism, but it was not a full-blown war.
And what is the justification that Poroshenko gave for this? You know that?
You tell me.
Well, hold on. You're making an argument and you don't know the details.
No,
of this
you tell me. You tell me.
Look, whatever opinion you have on Poroshenko and what happened in Ukraine in the Maidan, none of that is even close to justifying a full-blown invasion of a sovereign country.
Okay.
And there is no way in hell that you can deny that Russian troops started streaming into Ukraine after the Maidan. They started streaming in Crimea and in eastern Ukraine.
They had a referendum.
There is nobody that can deny that, and the referendum was held after the invasion.
Wait a minute.
There is not a single person who can deny that, and all the war and all the bloodshed is caused by that invasion.
You're wrong.
It all stems back to that.
In Crimea, there was always a Russian military base in Sevastopol of 25,000 persons.
true. Yeah.
And it was given by Russia, the Soviet Union, to Ukrainian people. It was given.
It was quite the opposite. It was Crimea. Hold on. Crimea was given from the Russian Soviet Republic to the Ukrainian Soviet Republic. Blah, blah, blah. I'm aware of the situation. But in exchange, Ukraine allowed the Russian ships to stay in the Sevastopol port.
So
There was an agreement of
was there a referendum there?
What, in Crimea?
Yeah.
After the
Did they accept to be part of Ukraine?
Oh yeah, some places with 110, 120%.
All right. It doesn't matter.
The troops were allowed to vote.
No, but you
the
have
reporters were allowed to vote.
Then you have to be consistent. Because Poroshenko, when he was elected by the population, do the people of Donbass participated to the election?
They didn't. Hold on.
They didn't. No, they didn't.
Show me. You've been looking for a video. I'm still waiting for the video that you need to be. I'm very consistent.
I'm asking you.
Yanukovych was elected by the Ukrainian people, and he made a promise.
Not by the Ukrainian people.
Yes, by the Ukrainian.
By a portion of the Ukrainian people. That's a lie.
That's a part.
It was a majority of the Ukrainian people.
No. The people of Donbass did
What do you mean,
participate.
Yanukovych was not elected by the majority. Oh my God, dude.
Poroshenko was not.
Can you pay attention, please, to what I'm telling you?
Yanukovych,
Can you please pay attention?
But those elections included Donbass.
Wait. You disagree with me without even knowing my argument. Let me do my argument, please. So I'm saying that Yanukovych was elected, at least supposedly, because there are many allegations of voter fraud in that election, and that is true. There's many allegations. It's uncertain whether or not he was even elected by the majority. But either way, let's suspend our disbelief and imagine he was elected democratically, and he was elected. Some of the Western Ukrainians voted for him because he promised to have closer relations with the EU. As I said before, no, with the EU, no, with the EU. He said he was going to get in a closer relationship, trading relation with the EU. And when he became president, he did a U-turn and he said, nope, no more EU here, we're going to get closer relations with Russia. As I said before, it's the same as if Boris Johnson said, we're going to do Brexit. When he gets elected, nope, no Brexit for you.
Yeah,
and all the majority of people will vote for him.
I mean, Boris Johnson lie all the time.
Ukrainians had the right to go and protest.
Obama.
After that, his people, his troops, his police force had shot at the Ukrainians. You might disagree with this as much as you want. It's a fact. It's a fact that Ukrainians were shot at by the
and there was a coup,
Yanukovych.
Sure. And there was a coup.
And then there was a coup because he was he was committing crimes against his own people right then and there, and the people rebelled against him.
Now the question. So. Now let's imagine that the coup was justified and Yanukovych was overturned. Why was there no fair election afterward? Because you don't have an answer for that. You don't have an answer for that.
It was an emergency state. There wasn't time to conduct a proper election.
So it is Stefan Bandera. Do you know him?
Yeah, I know him.
Why there is a
because he's a Ukrainian hero.
Ah, really?
And I fully support him.
Do you admit he was a Nazi?
I support him.
Do you admit he was a Nazi?
He wasn't a Nazi.
He was not a Nazi.
He sided with the Nazis temporarily, and then he betrayed the Nazis and rebelled against them. And he was put in prison by the Nazis. This is what these people will not talk about. This is what they will never
discuss. They even made a monument to this bastard.
Very good, because he's a Ukrainian hero, a true hero. A true hero.
Why did Poroshenko ban the Communist Party in 2015?
Because they were subversive to the Ukrainian people. I think we should ban all Nazi parties and all communist parties around the world. There should be no communist and Nazi parties.
And you get to decide what's communist, what's not, right? It's you. It's like
gets to decide.
Yeah.
Where the ideology gets to decide. We look at their ideology, and their ideology shows whether they're Nazi or not. Which shows that the Ukrainian government is not a Nazi government.
So they're not
and the Russian one is much closer.
And therefore, the Ukrainian government's banned the Communist Party, but it hasn't banned Right Sector, and it hasn't.
Right Sector is not a fascist party.
Oh yeah.
Look, I've seen bloody swastikas on their arms.
So you get to decide.
Yeah, go get triggers somewhere else.
So you get to decide what's fascist, what's not fascist.
No, of course not.
What's communist, what's not communist.
That's why I read you what Yarosh had done in the Pravy sector. He left the Pravy sector, and well saying that he does not want any support for any subversive far-right ideologies in Ukraine.
All right.
What a horrible man, isn't he? And this man was the leader of the Pravy sector.
So why, after the Maidan coup, 2014, there was no democratic election that took place?
Because it was impossible. It was a short while after that, Putin has invaded Ukraine.
Look, that's a perfect.
There was not enough time.
That's a perfect
There was not
excuse.
enough time to do any of that.
No. That's a perfect excuse to just exclude a bunch of people and just to implement a totalitarian regime.
What totalitarian regime? Where's the totalitarianism?
Where is the totalitarianism when you have like a big portion of the population that can't vote and that has to comply with whatever like
it was not possible in that
perfect forms.
Even if you were right about this thing, it would still be unacceptable for Russia to invade Ukraine. And they did in 2014, right after the Maidan.
Okay.
So Yanukovych fled to Russia, and Russia invaded Ukraine. One after the other.
Yeah.
You can't deny that.
Okay. But let's forget the Russian invasion.
Oh, let's forget the Russian invasion. Excellent. Let's forget the invasion.
Yeah.
The thing that sparked this conflict, the thing that made all of these deaths, let's forget about it.
I want to bring an hypothetical scenario. Even if there was zero Russian intervention, the people will still rebel against the Poroshenko regime because they were not able to vote and he was not elected legitimately. So you still would have a civil war in Ukraine.
We would have a civil war, not a war with Russia, which is what we had in 2014.
Yeah, but the problem is that civil war on the Western side was funded by Western forces. Yes, it was. So if
if the West can fund the other side, I say Russia can also fund the other side.
Russia started this war and it immediately started giving funds and weapons to the eastern Ukraine.
Just like the right sector and Svoboda also got their weapons from God knows where.
You do know that right sector is a political party.
Yeah.
They don't go to war themselves. Azov is a military. Svoboda is also a political party.
No, but they were
part weapons and go to war.
In 2014 they did because they were part of the Maidan activists.
Look,
they were part of the Maidan activists. So they were responsible for most of the Maidan violence.
Right, so they were the ones who were shooting themselves.
I mean, on the western side, right? On the western side, yes, they were. They were like the.
This is the same conspiracy theory.
It's not a conspiracy.
This is the same idiocy as the conversation about the Russian biolabs in Ukraine. Oh, you know, Ukraine is developing these dangerous pathogens in Russia, and then the Russians are bombing these same labs, possibly letting these pathogens escape. Are we thinking here?
I think it's fucked up to put it there in the first place.
Nobody put it there. That's the issue.
Oh, no.
Nobody put it there. It was
wait.
$18 million of investment is barely enough to have basic conditions in one lab. It's not enough to have a bunch of labs spread around the country. 18 million is nothing in bioweapons. Nothing, less than nothing.
That's not true. Bioweapons are incredibly cheap. That's one of their appeals.
I don't know what to say. Bioweapons' appeal is that they don't destroy the infrastructure. That's the main appeal of them. It's not them being cheap. It's very expensive to develop biological weapons.
They are
The alleged biological weapons, as in viruses and diseases, are difficult and very expensive to develop. And most importantly of all, it's very expensive to contain them so that they don't escape the lab work. Which is something we can bring to the Wuhan labs. But anyway, it's a great again, as I said before, I'm not going to shake hands with people who openly support the side that's genociding my people. You support Putin.
I just don't support your side.
You explained in the conversation, you shared the Z for zombie, the Russian symbol. You said, oh, all Putin is doing the right thing. I support
look, that was a fucking
the bear is
joke.
getting his honey pot.
That was a fucking joke.
Sure, it's a joke. It shows you a very nice joke. Oh, you know, a good old Hitler. The wolf is killing all the dirty sheep, right? All the Jews. That's a nice joke.
You're trying to gaslight me, okay?
Gaslight how?
Yes.
You've shown support for Russia. You've been supporting Russia. You also support Russia.
I didn't support.
Dude, you support.
What about Georgian government? What about Georgian government?
Here we go.
What do you want from Georgian government?
We're not speaking about that.
Yeah, but still, that happens.
We're talking about Ukraine and Russia. And in this situation, Russia's in the wrong with Georgia. It's in the wrong with Chechnya. It's in the wrong with Ukraine.
We're not speaking about Georgia, okay? And the affairs between Russia and Georgia. Those are separate examples.
Are they?
Completely separate.
Russia is the link between them. Because Russia declares war on all the different regions.
Again, we are taking the conversation to a completely different side.
What do you mean? How is that?
The best thing, look, the best
About
thing,
the wars that Russia started.
do you want to hear me or not?
Okay, go on.
I think that the best thing that you can do for your country is to persuade your people to stop fighting and find a diplomatic solution. Because if you keep incentivizing for people to continue fighting, there's going to be more deaths of innocent people. Yes, I am.
So, I think it's funny that you would tell me we need to get neutral relations with Russia, we need to get diplomacy going with Russia. It's the same situation as if, you guys can see us both, and then he jumps at me, starts punching me and kicking my ass, and I'm like, guys, this guy's better at fighting than I am, help me. And you're like, I think you should look for a diplomatic solution, I think you should be neutral to him, and he's gonna stop.
But we can't start a hot war between two or three nuclear nations, it's too dangerous.
Nobody's saying, I'm not saying we should start a war. I'm not saying we should start World
But
War III. That's the
I
last
thought
thing.
that's what you meant. No,
We should never go for World War III. That's the
so
last
if
thing
any
anyone should ever
nuclear
try. In fact, that's
European
something that
nation
we never
or
should
America
try.
help. So if any nuclear European or American, say, nation are now helping Ukraine,
They're already helping, yes.
Yeah,
They're doing the
but
right thing.
I mean,
they're
sure.
doing what's right according to the Budapest Memorandum. And they should do more. They should impose more sanctions on Russia. They should send more weapons to Ukraine.
Would it not might it not be better to try and reach a diplomatic solution?
It's impossible
Which
because
is
your own people kill this way. Your own people are going to die.
You claim that you have a Ukrainian mother. Technically, they count as your people too.
Yeah, they
At least
are.
partially.
It's a war between brothers and sisters.
You're supporting an invader who's killing Ukrainians by supporting. Yes, you are. Look, now you're telling me that all the things you said in the conversation were trolling.
Both sides are wrong, but yours is
Here we go.
Yours is worse.
The side that got invaded, the side that's defending their land from the Russian invasion is in the wrong. The side that is losing people in peaceful cities away from the front, they're getting bombed by Russia. That side is in the wrong.
Can I just so I can put my hand
More
up?
than 100
I want a
children
closing
dead.
statement from you, like a couple minutes closing statement, couple minutes closing statement.
Russia
Closing
invaded.
statement.
Closing statement. Russia invaded. Russia started this war. Russia is responsible. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, that's what we hear on the news.
Closing statement.
The Ukrainian government is an authoritarian fascist state that discriminates against its own ethnical Russian minority, and over the last 8 years it has purposely bombed villages, towns in eastern Ukraine. It's time for peace, it's time to stop fighting, it's time to pray for mothers, children, and everyone involved that should have the right to live peacefully. Cheers.